WPWK, For What It's Worth by Buffalo Springfield. This is Colleen with you, and in the next hour, we'll be exploring the history of the fourth speaker in the Klipsch Heritage Range, the LaScala, which was built in 1963 and had a lot of famous fans. We'll be speaking with Klipsch historian Jim Hunter about the history and the fans, including Peter, Paul, and Mary, which we'll hear just now on WPWK.
The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
Peter, Paul, and Mary covering Bob Dylan's Blowin' in the Wind. Just an absolutely amazing song and an amazing rendition here on WPWK. This is Colleen with you, and in the studio with me I have Jim Hunter, who is the official Klipsch historian and put this museum together for us here over at CES. How are you today?
Doing well, Colleen.
Good. Today we're going to talk about the fourth speaker that was constructed in the Klipsch Heritage Range, which was the LaScala, which is still in production today. It was initially built in 1963. And I wanted to ask you, and has a lot of fans, we'll be listening to a lot of music today of fans of the Klipsch horn, the LaScala. But I wanted to ask you first, why was the LaScala built? Why did Paul Klipsch want to build the LaScala?
Well, Paul had been exposed to many traveling shows with very poor sound reinforcement. And
now that's a strange thing.
And he knew
Can you believe it?
he knew he could do better. Mm-hmm. And so basically he started with a Klipsch horn concept, cut the corner woofer off the bottom, and put a 2x2 cube fully enclosed horn underneath it. Now that did compromise frequency response, but it did make it portable, and it certainly was intended for traveling groups. Mm-hmm. Now his target in performance was the Altec A7 Voice of the Theater. We have the response curves of that product that he did in 1963, and he was able to make a speaker that was substantially smaller, 2 dB hotter, and a wider frequency response. It's interesting to me that in the paper that he did, at the very end, he puts a footnote, and he says, one interesting application has been for electrified string instruments. I don't think he knew what was coming.
He probably didn't. This is before Dylan went electric, I think, wasn't it?
Yes.
At the Newport Folk Festival, and shocked a lot of people. And as we know, Paul W. Klipsch wasn't the biggest fan of rock music, was he?
No.
He was more of a reluctant rocker.
Yes, at best.
So the applications, was it also used in people's homes as well?
It certainly was. Mm-hmm. Now, it was a very utilitarian-looking speaker. I mean, they were, at best, painted black. Mm-hmm. Most of them were, raw plywood. So it was strictly functionality, but people did, where they didn't have a corner, they could certainly put a LaScala in there and get nearly Klipsch horn performance.
Right, exactly.
Just a slightly restricted low end.
Right. Well, why don't we listen to a song by Chick Corea, Return to Forever, because Chick Corea himself was also a fan of the LaScala, was he not?
Yes.
Right. So,
and toured with it.
And he toured with it. So did he use it as a stage monitor?
I think so.
Right. Wow. Okay, well, let's have a listen to Return to Forever. What game shall we play today? Chick Corea on WPWK. Harry Belafonte on WPWK in them old cotton fields back home. This is Colleen with you, and in the studio with me I have the Klipsch historian Jim Hunter. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Colleen.
And on this show, we're discussing the LaScala, which was the fourth loudspeaker built in the Klipsch Heritage Range in 1963. And we're talking about its history, its various uses, and playing a lot of music by the wide spectrum of LaScala fans. And Harry Belafonte was one of them, was he not?
Certainly.
Yeah, and Chick Corea we heard before that, and Peter, Paul, and Mary. In fact, you said you heard from one of Peter, Paul, and Mary in the last couple of years. They still have their LaScalas.
I believe it was Mary that called
Travers.
in and wanted, some service on the her LaScalas, and they're the same ones they had back in the day. Now, you mentioned Harry Belafonte. Harry and Robert Goulet and Carol Lawrence, all three of them in their contracts insisted on LaScalas for voice reinforcement.
Wow, because of the bass cutoff probably as well, because...
And, the voice clarity.
Yeah, exactly. Now, it had a lot of uses also in the theater.
Yes, besides the sound touring application, Paul intended it for over proscenium arch locations, like in theaters. One of the first applications, about 1969, was at Radio City Music Hall, and roughly 20 LaScalas replaced the RCA sound system there, and was the first non-RCA system in Radio City Music Hall. A few years later, the Esplanade in Boston, where Arthur Fiedler had a lot of work, that was reinforced with LaScalas. And then about the same time, we had an installation at Caesar's Palace.
Oh, here in Las Vegas.
A little closer to home.
Right now, at least.
Yes.
I don't know if I want to call Las Vegas home. Now, Arthur Fiedler was also a personal fan of the Klipsch horn as well, so I'm sure he was very happy to have the LaScalas at the Boston Pops at the Esplanade.
Yes.
Well, another fan was Bob Dylan, right?
Yes.
Well, let's play some music by Bob Dylan from his album Blood on the Tracks, known as his divorce album. This is Tangled Up in Blue on WPWK. WPWK with Stevie Wonder's Superstition. You're listening to Klipsch Audio's radio station here at CES. We're the keepers of the sound. This is Colleen from Classic Album Sundays with you, and we are dedicating this radio show to the LaScala, the fourth speaker in the Klipsch Heritage loudspeaker range. We've been listening to a lot of music by fans and musicians who are big fans of the LaScala, including Mr. Stevie Wonder, who we just heard. Before that, we heard the Grateful Dead, Uncle John's Band, and Jerry Garcia was a very big fan of the LaScala speaker. And we listened to Chick Corea earlier, Peter, Paul, and Mary, and these are all fans of the LaScala speaker who used them while they were touring, correct, Jim?
Yes, there are a few more. Oak Ridge Boys, Roy Clark, Paul Winter, Manhattan Transfer.
Wow.
One of the ones that you may have heard about yesterday, Bob Heil, in the early 70s, requested that Paul Klipsch build him 4 smaller versions of the LaScala, and they were intended as stage monitors. And in particular, they were intended for Jeff Beck. We have one of those on display down here.
And what did they call that one? It was a smaller LaScala.
Paul called it the Runt LaScala.
That's not a very nice name, is it?
Well, he had a lot of lesser names for other speakers.
Yeah, a man who definitely spoke his mind.
Indeed.
And we'll be talking about Paul Klipsch actually tomorrow on his special radio show dedicated to his life, and on Friday as well. And tomorrow we'll also be speaking about the other 2 loudspeakers in the Heritage Range, which are the Heresy and the Cornwall. So you'll be joining me tomorrow.
Yes. Both originally designed as center channel speakers.
And we should also mention that the LaScala can be used as a center channel with 2 Klipsch horns in a performance atmosphere.
very much so. And in a home atmosphere, too.
And in a home atmosphere, if you have a nice big home, which I unfortunately don't, but and you can also use them to flank.
Yes, you
Klipsch
can
horns.
use them flanked, and if you need more bass, you just add a very good subwoofer.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you can use LaScalas as for home use on their own with a subwoofer, so you get that nice meaty bottom end as well. Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining us here on WPWK. We're going to end this particular show with some Jeff Beck, because I think that's pretty apt. This is Jeff Beck from his album Blow by Blow on WPWK.